is going on, everybody? Welcome to our Sixers versus Nets analysis and breakdown. The series begins on Saturday. If you're watching us live, comment your expectations between the Sixers and the Nets. To break it down, I've got two of the best of the best. My man Tiago over there at Tiago PHL. What's going on, Tiago?
What's going on, Chris? What's going on, Sean? It's good to be back. Feels like we've been on the seesaw forever, this regular season seesaw of, a bunch of nothing games, but it starts on Saturday and it starts the Brooklyn Nets. I'm excited to break it down with you guys. I think the Nets are a little bit trickier than people make them out to be, but talent-wise, the Sixers are head and shoulders above, Brooklyn. So we'll see, but it's exciting to finally talk playoff basketball.
Absolutely, man. The time is here. Also joining us from Pick Swap Media and Fox Sports, The Gambler. He is Sean Bernard. Give him a follow on Twitter at Sean_Bernard1. What's up, Sean?
Yeah, I'm excited to be back in it, back chatting with you guys. The 82-game preseason is now over, so here is where all the marbles matter and things will be locked in. So, yeah, I'm excited for it to be the real thing, and it feels like we've been waiting for this for so long, and it's crazy how much it shifted to where this is basically all that matters. So I'm ready for showtime.
I am too, man. Like, everything has boiled down to this point. So let's jump right in, and let's talk about the Brooklyn Nets offense. Tiago, I'll throw it to you, man. What do we need to know about the Brooklyn Nets offense?
So with Brooklyn, you really have to split the season down in half, right? Because the first half of Brooklyn is entirely different than the second half of Brooklyn, primarily because they got rid of KD and they got rid of Kyrie Irving, and they obviously got nothing from Ben Simmons throughout the entire year. So when we talk about Brooklyn today, and you have the numbers up there, Chris, we can dive into more detail, but Brooklyn today is an offense that has really been flipped upside down, and it's an offense that's mostly run now by a name that Sixers fans are very familiar. His name is Mikal Bridges. He's a guy in Phoenix that was not primarily the ball handler in the Suns' offense, obviously, but with Brooklyn, his pick and roll volume has doubled from this time with Phoenix. So right off the bat, you see much more responsibility from Mikal running the offense. And, he's the type of player that he's a very interesting player, man. He's got star level potential. I don't think he's there yet, obviously, but you're seeing leaps in his game that indicate he could potentially turn out to be a star in the NBA. But so it starts there. It starts with Mikal running the show. They are an offense that really doesn't pressure the rim at a high level. They are mostly a mid-range corner three level offense, but they have a lot of interesting guys, man. And they have, Spencer Dinwiddie, who also came on the trade with Kyrie Irving, whose name we're going to talk about. They have a phenomenal big in Claxton, who's a great finisher around the basket. So there's a lot of different components to Brooklyn's offense that may provide the Sixers some difficulties in this series. But ultimately, when you talk about superstar level talent that wins in the playoffs, I don't think the Nets are at that level yet. They may be next year or the year after that, but right now they're just not, and they're not compared to the Sixers in that regard. So,
yeah, when you talk about Mikal Bridges, man, wow, what a performance with the Nets in 27 games since being traded there. He's averaged 26 plus points a game, shot 47.5% from the field. That has included 11 games where Bridges has had 30-plus points and 3 games where he had 40 or more points since the All-Star break. Bridges ranks 9th best in the NBA in terms of hitting the pull-up, good for 9.6 points per game and hitting 38+% from 3 on those opportunities. And spot-ups, very solid, 1.16 points per possession on spot-ups, good for 79th percentile with Brooklyn. Sean, what are some of your takes with this Brooklyn offense?
Yeah, it's been a different Mikal Bridges since he came to the Nets, and he's had such an interesting career arc where he's been the guy that was pretty much the prototypical 3-and-D guy with Phoenix. He's pretty much the model for a guy who's athletic, corner 3 shooter, and then we see him kind of being unleashed in Brooklyn, and it's very clear he's been taking in everything from the guys that surround him, guys like Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and the way that he's now has a creation ability off the dribble. It's very impressive. I think the whole world is going to kind of see him put on full display in this series. but like the Sixers shouldn't be heavily concerned with Mikal Bridges being the headliner to an offense that they're going against. He's still a fine player and a guy that is going to put forth some strong performances in this season, but I don't think he's that grade A superstar that at least at this point in his career that they should be concerned with. Outside of that, the Nets still have some matchup that the Sixers necessarily match up particularly well against the Nets. They have guys like Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, these big switchable versatile wings that do give the Sixers trouble when attacking on the perimeter. So there's going to be some stretches where I think that looks ugly from the Sixers perspective, where the Nets are able to get their damage. But overall, I think the talent gap just wins out and the Sixers defense will find a way to lock down.
Yep, we'll break down the Sixers defense soon. Any thoughts on Spencer Dinwiddie, a guy who's touched the ball on offense since the All-Star break the most for Brooklyn, 82.3 touches per game. You look at the Nets, they have the third highest isolation frequency in the NBA. And I think this is where like Spencer Dinwiddie shines. He averaged 1.20 points per possession in ISO ops. And there's only two other NBA teams that Dinwiddie has scored more against than the Sixers. That is the Timberwolves and the Knicks. This is a Sixers killer, Spencer Dinwiddie. Any thoughts on slowing this guy down on ISO ops?
ISO King Spencer Dinwiddie, Chris. Hey, right now, if this series comes down to Spencer ISOs, I think the Sixers will be just fine. I don't think Spencer ISOs are going to net Brooklyn much of anything in this series. I think when you go back and look at I studied that February game very heavily because that was the game that you had the new Nets team and you had the Sixers starters going up in Brooklyn. And when you watch Spencer that game, he was more of a playmaker. And one of the things that was very interesting in that game is Bridges playing off Dinwiddie. So Bridges, if you go back and dive into Bridges' numbers, he has run 20 more miles this season than the next guy in the NBA. Think about that. He leads the league in distance traveled by almost 20 miles. So start thinking about Dinwiddie attracting a second defender and Bridges sprinting to the corner. That's how I see the Nets elevating Dinwiddie's game against the Sixers. And the Sixers lost track of Bridges multiple times in that game. So defensively, they're going to have to be sharp to understand where Mikal is at all times, even without the ball. I think that's going to be the key. And then what Sean was brought up with some interesting points is Cam Johnson, really good player. Hasn't shot the ball particularly well in Brooklyn, but can attack a closeout, can put the ball in the court, can attack the rim, can pass. So, just because he hasn't shot the ball well doesn't mean he's not going to be an effective weapon for Brooklyn. So I like to watch him. And then the other thing is Claxton. For Brooklyn to actually make a dent in this series, they're going to have to do something different. They just can't line up against the Sixers like head on and expect to win this series. And I think with Claxton, what you're going to see is running off misses. Claxton is a really good transition player. And I think Brooklyn's going to look to get him out in the open court, get him some easy buckets. Embiid is not particularly a guy who tracks back in transition. So I'll be on the lookout for those things. But to your original question, I don't think Dinwiddie is much of a threat in ISO. I mean, I could be completely wrong. So
Yeah, I agree with that as far as the Dinwiddie perspective. He's very much like a combo guard in the wrong ways in terms of he's not as much of not a good enough playmaker to be a point guard, not a good enough scorer to be a effective shooting guard. So he kind of hits this like middle ground, and that's kind of why he's bounced around as much as he has. He's still like a solid player and a respectable NBA guy, so not to completely trash him, but not a guy that should be overly concerned on these scouting reports. And yeah, Nick Claxton, I'm excited to talk more about him. He defensively is where he truly shines. We'll get into that. But I'm interested to see what they do as far as some pick and roll stuff with him on the offensive end, finding ways to unleash him. Because as much as, Joel Embiid is a different beast, but he is kind of stylistically a type of player that could give Joel trouble with just an effective offensive rebounder, a guy who can get up vertically, stuff like that. So I do think there's ways that they could utilize him for stretches. At the end of the day, Joel Embiid's still Joel Embiid, though.
Yep. All right. Lastly, to finish up the Nets offense, they are 10th best in transition, but also the 4th lowest when it comes to points in the post. This is a team that wants to beat you from the perimeter. The Nets and Sixers offense are very different. The Nets want to get the ball and shoot it fast. They average the 9th quickest time on the shot clock, while the Sixers are pretty much near the bottom of the list in that area. Let's jump into our next segment, and that is breaking down the Sixers offense. We'll go in reverse. Throw it to you, Sean. How does the Sixers attack the Nets?
Yeah, I mean, the Sixers offense has gotten to a point where it's so simplistic that it's kind of effective. We see the James Harden and Joel Embiid pick and roll. If Harden looks to get downhill, he has gotten downhill much more effectively this year, and he can attack the basket that way. If the corner defender helps off, that creates an open three for PJ Tucker, Tobias Harris, whoever's not in the dunker spot, I guess, in that one. And then there's obviously Joel Embiid. The concern is if the Sixers get too isolation heavy, which has happened for stretches throughout the season and throughout last year's playoffs. So need to see some movement, some pick and roll, as much two-man action between James Harden and Joel Embiid as possible. And that's also a ton of pressure on James Harden to deliver. And also Tyrese Maxey cannot be an afterthought in this. I think this is a matchup where he can make a huge impact in this series. And I would like him to be set free to be able to attack in this one.
Yeah, going to Joel Embiid and James Harden, man, that's where it starts and ends with me. The Sixers bigs are 76th percentile rolling to the basket. James Harden and his improvements this year has completely unlocked Embiid in the pick and pop game this year. The Harden-Embiid connection has accounted 244 total field goals per PBP stats. That is an elite number, and just Embiid has just risen to another level in that 10 to 16 feet area, 46+% in 2021, 42% in 2022, over 50% in 2023. And he's just been so much more efficient in every way, but more so dominating in fourth quarters and during crunch time. Embiid is shooting 50+% in fourth quarters this season, far and away his highest mark during his Sixers career. So when it comes to the Sixers offense, it's all about Embiid. As Embiid goes, so does the Sixers. Tiago, what is your take on the Sixers offense?
Yeah, Embiid's going to average 30 points a game, 11 rebounds, a couple assists. That's just going to happen. It doesn't matter who, doesn't matter where, he's going to do that. To what Sean is saying, I actually think this is where the Sixers can lose themselves a little bit in this series. And Sean touched on a very interesting point because isolation basketball has been a trademark of Doc Rivers' offense in the postseason. I mean, it's just the way that has trended over time. And Brooklyn is one of the better isolation defenses in the NBA. They average, let me look up here, 0.9 points per isolation possession, which is fourth best in the NBA. And they have a guy who we just talked about, Claxton. He has defended over 200 isolation possessions this year, averaging 0.79 points per possession. By far the highest volume isolation defender in the NBA. So they'll switch Claxton on Harden, they'll switch Claxton on Maxey, and they'll make it really, really tough for the Sixers to get open looks. If you go back and look at that February game, the Sixers had an effective field goal percentage of 48%. The reason why they won that game is they got to the line. They didn't shoot the ball particularly well. And if you go back and look, Brooklyn made it extremely hard for Philly to get open looks. It was a tough game. And beat Bully Claxton, obviously, is going to do that to anybody. But Claxton's athletic. He can meet Embiid at the shot point. He can make it tough for Embiid to get clean looks. And he doesn't foul. Like, Claxton does not a guy who generally fouls a lot. Now, I could be wrong. It could be that he just fouls out like almost every game because Embiid has that effect. But I think defensively, they're going to struggle to get isolation points. And I think the second point defensively is Harden as a scorer this series. I think he's going to struggle as well because I think what's going to happen is Brooklyn's going to put Bridges on Harden. And if you look at how Brooklyn likes to defend, they like to take away the mid-range paint area, and they love to take away the above the break three. And if you look at Harden's shot profile, that's where he usually gets his points from. So I think Harden will be a better playmaker in the series. And to what Sean was saying, Maxey should have a field day. I mean, Maxey can get by anybody on that team. He's going to get open looks. He's going to get open spot-up looks. So I think if Maxey has a solid series, the Sixers will obviously be fine. But if you have Harden struggling to score and Maxey struggling to score, then I think you start talking about, is this series going to go 6? Could maybe even go 7? Who knows? But I think defensive is where Brooklyn can kind of make an impact in this series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Nick Claxton, I mean, I'm high enough on him that I think he's going to be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate by the end of his career. He's really got some special gifts on that side of the floor. I would like to see more of, I mean, you just can't play traditional post-up offense in today's NBA, especially in playoffs. We've seen how heavily teams shift over and prevent the ball from even entry passes being able to be given to Joel. But I would like to see some of that just play out of the post by the elbow and give Embiid his touches to go to work and be a bully to Claxton, because that is where the advantage is. And as great as the mid-range jumper is, and that Embiid's gone to another level by utilizing that so heavily and so effectively this year, I would like to see some traditional post-up moments where he takes Claxton. And another concern that I have with the Sixers throughout the playoffs, and this is just stylistically by its nature, is they're one of the best teams at getting to the free throw line in the NBA. When you have James Harden, have Joel Embiid, that's just how it's going to be. But that can't be your trick that you rely on. Like, you can't be counting on referees to make calls. It doesn't work the same in the playoffs. And I think there's a chance like that could get in their head and help them and have them unravel for stretches. So don't be dependent on the referees when we do get into these foul baiting kind of situations.
Love it.
And that's the thing. Refs, if the refs swallow the whistle, it's going to be tricky.
Yeah.
Because shot for shot, the Sixers are going to struggle to make shots this series. But like I said, they're going to get to the line 30, 35 times a game. It's over. But, we'll see.
Yep. How Embiid gets Claxton in foul trouble will be definitely a low-key storyline of this series. Let's jump into James Harden. We already kind of touched on it. 14th postseason, had an excellent season with the Sixers, 21 points, 6 rebounds. Wait, hold on. Yeah, that's not right. And shooting 44+% from the field. I have vivid memories of this guy being a negative 16 on the court, 11 points on 9 shots in that game 6 against the Miami Heat. I know he had an injury, but there it is. We have to see James Harden take that next level as a scorer, especially with Embiid off the floor. That's where I need to see Doc get creative. I'll throw it to you, Thiago, first. Expectations for James Harden, taking this Sixers team to the next level.
Expectations are very clear. You're the second leading scorer on this team. You elevate the second unit, and you step up when Embiid is either struggling or not on the court. It's that simple. To let Maxey be that guy, the Sixers are not going to win a championship. I mean, for as much as we all love Maxey, you're just not built for that. So if you're asking me what the expectations are for this postseason, it is as clear as day. There's no rumor Harden is the 3rd or 4th leading scorer on this team. There's just no way. So can he be the 3rd and 4th leading scorer against Brooklyn? The Sixers will be fine? Yes. Can he be that against Boston and Milwaukee? No. So I think that, I think he is going to have some leeway to kind of grow himself back into the postseason. We talk about, the leg injury going into the regular season towards the end. So is he fully healthy? I think he's going to get 4 or 5 games to kind of get his footing down. But once the Boston series hits, it is go time. And there's no other way around it. So I'm looking for health. I'm looking for his ability to break down guys like Cam Johnson, guys like Dwight Finney-Smith, guys like even Mikal Bridges, because when we talk about the Celtics, you're talking about Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart. So if you're struggling against those 3 guys with the Nets, it's not a good sign moving forward. So I think overall the Sixers will be fine if Harden is not at his peak. But, I mean, the Sixers have bigger goals down the line, and it starts with Harden and Embiid. So,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I kind of like this Nets matchup for the Sixers, it's a little bit of a warm-up for these top perimeter players. Like, the Nets aren't as talented at these areas. I mean, Bridges is very good, but guys like Dorian Fifth and Cam Johnson aren't going to take you in the same ways that guys like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are. But it's a similar kind of stylistic structure and matchup issue. So this is a good kind of feeler for how are they going to line up defensively, see that happen. And James Harden's kind of one of the bigger pieces in that picture. And I mean, I've been super complimentary all season of him finding a balance as a scorer and a playmaker. I think it's been miles better than it was last year with the Sixers, but that's got to continue. It can't be the guy that took 2 shots in the second half of that final Heat loss. There's got to be that foot on the gas feeling, and I'm also going to be really watching for what this second unit looks like, and some of this is out of Harden's control, but I would love to see the James Harden and athletes kind of lineup of Paul Reed, Jalen McDaniels, D'Anthony Melton, Daniel House, even roll them out. Let's get some craziness. Let's run it. And I think that's a good change of pace, especially when in the half court, Harden and Embiid not known for their pace of play or athleticism with that. So having a little, curveball that you throw at teams, I think is effective. I want to see that. And James Harden's at the heart of it. I'm not going to lie and say I'm not 100% confident because of that Achilles lingering issue. You never want to see a soft tissue issue, especially with James Harden. So health is definitely a key factor. And I think the week off is a huge storyline for him too.
All right. Before we get into top matchups to watch between the Sixers and Nets, this has kind of been trendy, and I threw it to YouTube to vote. Should Jalen McDaniels start over Tobias Harris in the playoffs? Any thoughts on that? I mean, voting-wise, 60-40 said
Who
yeah.
the hell did 60%? What are they watching? I'm sorry. Maybe you guys have a different opinion on this. I haven't been remotely impressed with McDaniels to give him a starting spot on the championship team. Have you guys seen anything differently? Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, so I'll say this. When we talk about like the lack of athleticism, the matching up, I do think Jalen McDaniels is going to be a key part of this rotation. I don't think it'll even be entertained that he gets a starting role. I mean, I do think there is a chance that there's games where he plays possibly more minutes than Tobias Harris, but I don't even know if Doc Rivers will make those decisions. And Tobias it's been so tough because like what it boils down to for me when looking at Tobias is there isn't a singular basketball trait that he does the best on this team. And that makes it hard. Like when I talk about the second unit of all athletes and running things like that, like that's not Tobias Harris, but he's also not a guy that's a catch and shoot floor spacer. He flashed it earlier on in the season, but has kind of regressed in that area. So we haven't seen it. So it's going to be strange how they find a way to fit him. I do like Jalen McDaniels definitely more than it sounds like Tiago does, but I don't think that there's any chance that he hops into the starting lineup.
Can I make a Tobias point? Sorry, just one more Tobias point, Chris. The Nets give up the second most corner threes in the NBA, specifically on the right corner.
What's up, PJ Tucker?
Yeah, that's right. Then the Sixers have a bunch of guys get corner three. So PJ Tucker, Melton, Maxey. Let me give you Tobias Harris corner three attempts by month this season, right? So in December, he had 36 corner three attempts. Great Tobias Harris. January, 24. February, 20. By March, he was taking 15 corner threes for the entire month.
Yeah.
Dude, you want to make a name for yourself and get a ring? Park your ass in the corner and just wait for a wide open shot. And if you do that, nobody's going to get on you about the money. Nobody's even going to mention Jalen McDaniels. So it's
and
just
as
simple as that.
The shots will be there too.
Right. They will absolutely be there. The Nets will pack the paint. They're not going to let the Sixers get in the heart of the paint. And it's going to be wide open. Just hit those shots and you're fine. Absolutely fine. So.
Yep. All right, let's jump into our next question. Top matchups to watch between the Sixers and Nets. Sean, lead us off, man.
Yeah, Claxton and Embiid's going to be the number one for me. I know we kind of touched on it, and more so, like I don't think there's any questions. Joel Embiid is the more elite talent, and we know who he is at this point. But it is kind of that storyline for how the whistle is called if Embiid is able to get to the line, and what the Nets do on the other side of the ball. Like, do they pull Embiid out to the perimeter? Do the Sixers still run with some drop coverage? And how much is Claxton utilized as a screening roller? Exactly how that looks is something I'm going to be paying attention to. And Tyrese Maxey, how he matches up on the defensive end. And I need to see him involved in the offensive one as well. So Tyrese Maxey, I don't have in my mind exactly who I expect him to be matching up with. I don't know if Dinwiddie is going to be how it shakes out. It's definitely possible. But I need to see Maxey winning his battle. And that Embiid versus the whistle, I guess, is more of my matchup here.
Mm-hmm. We have a comment. Do you all think Tobias will sell the Celtics series?
What does he mean by sell?
I don't know. I was hoping you guys would know what that meant.
Sell out, like blow it, basically.
So blow it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's got a much harder time in the Boston series than in Brooklyn. Let's cross the bridge when we get there.
Tiago, who is your top matchup to watch between the Sixers and Nets?
Yeah, I want to make it clear the point that Sean made. If Claxton is foul trouble, there's nothing Brooklyn can put on the court to slow down Embiid at that point. I think their second most used lineup was Dwight Finney-Smith at center, and Embiid will literally dunk Finney-Smith into the rim, and there'll be nothing left of this guy. So I think it's key that Claxton stays out of foul trouble. But for me, it's going to be Mikal Bridges against Harden, just from the sheer fact of I want to see how Harden looks against top-level perimeter defense. And I think that's going to be the matchup. I think the matchup this season was 1 out of 9. So Harden went 1 for 9 against Bridges. But he got to the line 6 times. He had another 13 assists when he was matched up against Bridges. So Yeah, he's going to struggle to score, but I think if he play makes off that, I think the Sixers will be fine. So I think that's the matchup I'm looking for. And I'm looking to see how is Doc going to piece together the non-Embiid minutes, right? It seems that the same reoccurring theme every postseason, how the Sixers survive without Joel. So obviously Reed has earned those minutes, but we all know where that usually leads when Doc Rivers is the coach.
Brandon chimes in. Tobias was our most consistent player last year in the playoffs after ending the regular season pretty poorly. Hopefully that continues. Let's jump into defense here. And talking about the Brooklyn Nets, let me get my thing up here. There it is. There's the Brooklyn Nets defense versus the Sixers defense. You look at this Nets defense, they have a bunch of wings, Cam Johnson, Royce O'Neal, Finney Smith. Those guys can guard 1 through 5. We already talked about Nick Claxton, one of among the league's best defenders, ranking second in block shots. He can handle switches, handle ball handlers on switches. I'll throw it to you, Tiago. What do we need to know about the Nets defense? We kind of already touched on it, but real fast.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Claxton is going to be a defensive player of the year. I mean, that's really the thing that people need to know. And Mikal Bridges is a really good player defensively. They're going to switch. They're going to take away the top of the key. They're going to take away the paint. They absolutely struggle around the rim. They will give up a bunch of stuff around the rim. When the Sixers faced Brooklyn back in that March game, when you look at the short shot profile, it didn't seem like the Sixers did any homework because they took a bunch of above the break threes and shot something like 20%, and they didn't get around the rim. I think if the Sixers want to make this a very easy series, they can study the opponent, and I think if they do that, they'll be fine. But it seems like when the Sixers get in the playoffs, they like doing what they know best. And I think if they fall into that trap, they're going to struggle to score against Brooklyn. So I'm hoping that they can lean on their strength. And if they do that, for as well as Brooklyn has played defensively, I think the Sixers will handle them okay.
All right. We have a comment. The local media doesn't even want to see Paul Reed play. I definitely disagree. I disagree with that as well. And we need the energy guys. Paul Reed needs to play. Like we were talking about this before we went live. If we see Dedmon and Harrell on the court, and we're going to get into this very soon, I'm going to be flipping tables. Sean, what do we need to know about the Nets defense?
Yeah, I guess my top takeaway is like top to bottom, this Nets team is not going to fold. They're not going to quit. These are all guys that compete, and they all have like individual skills that are pretty impressive, specifically as far as versatile wings and guys that can defend on the perimeter, be switchable. The Cam Johnsons, the Mikal Bridges, the Dorian Finney-Smith, the same guys that were kind of going through it. So they're not going to back down by any means. Jack Vaughn's also a terrific head coach too. Yeah. I think he's going to mix in some creative stuff that gives the Sixers issues. So, yeah, like I guess that's my biggest takeaway is that they're not going to roll over. They're going to make life hard for the Sixers, and it's going to be up to them to respond to that.
Yeah. All pressure's on the Sixers. No question.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Brandon says, honestly, just want to see Embiid not get injured for once.
Be nice.
Well, don't have him out on the court in game. 5 minutes left.
All right. Let's jump into our next question. This is the big one. We kind of already touched on it, but how does the Brooklyn Nets slow down Joel Embiid? Tiago, any thoughts?
Yes, zone. They're gonna zone up a ton. I don't have the zone numbers behind what Brooklyn did this year, and the Sixers were a historically great spot up team this season. I mean, I'm talking about one of the best spot up efficiency numbers in NBA history since they started tracking the statistics. So yeah, you're playing with fire, but if Embiid's going for 35, 40 men, you're gonna have to put on the Sixers shooters, and I think that's something that Jack Vaughn is going to lean on pretty early. For as well as they have individual defensive pieces, I don't think they can man up on Joel. Nobody really can. So I think we're gonna see a ton of zone. And it's going to rely on Philly's shooters to come through like they have all year. So I feel confident that the Sixers can do that. But, man, if they man up on Joel, it's going to be 30, 35 every night.
Yep. Sean?
Yeah, I mean the short answer is you can't. You really can't stop Joel. It's he's just added layers to his game that make it impossible. More so, what I think it forces to happen is the Nets are gonna have to make a decision. Is you either bet on Joel Embiid not being capable of beating you, or you bet on the rest of the Sixers not being capable to beating you. And if I had to have a hunch which way they'll lean, is that they're not gonna let Joel be that guy. So it is gonna be on the rest of the Sixers to hit spot up shots. I'm interested to see how much they leave Claxton alone with Embiid because they do obviously trust him defensively a ton, and he's a guy who is incredible defensively. But there's just it always amazes me Joel next to guys, other real deal centers like Nick Claxton, and Joel still looking just so much more massive and so much just more skilled than these guys. So I don't expect that to change either. I do think Joel is gonna get the better of him no matter what. And to me, this is a testament to Joel just adding these layers to his game. It doesn't feel like this is the same player that Boston was able to throw things at him that he had no clue how to deal with it. It feels like he's taken strides forward in just his processing of the game, his understanding, him breaking down, figuring out what he needs to do to beat teams. And I think that's going to be put on display throughout these playoffs.
Yep. All right. Next up, let's talk about the Sixers defense. Sean, what do you expect from how the Sixers will try to slow down Bridges, Dinwiddie? Again, we already kind of touched on it, but any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they decide to match up and how they can hold up on the perimeter. Because, like I mentioned early on, these are the models of players that have given the Sixers trouble. These big wings that can put the ball on the floor, that can attack closeouts. The Sixers are pretty egregious on the way they close out sometimes on going too strong and allowing a blow by. So that needs to stop. I do think Jalen McDaniels is going to play a big role because of this, matching up with these types of wings. Same with D'Anthony Melton. Can he hold up against guys that are a little bit bigger than him, especially looking ahead against the Celtics where they're going to face similar archetypes of players who with even more skilled and even more talented. So I think that's the biggest test is if they can find a way to guard the perimeter. If I had to pinpoint like a potential downfall for the Sixers team, that's probably it, is their perimeter defense. That's probably at the top of my list. So I would like to see a statement from them that they have a plan and that they can execute it with the players that they have.
Tiago?
It's a couple of things with Brooklyn's offense. They love motion. They run a ton of dribble handoff. They run guys, cuts, baseline cuts. If you're having Georges Niang track a guy like Joe Harris, you're asking for trouble. So be smart about who's on the court and who can track guys off dribble handoffs, off cuts, because the Nets are not a team with a elite point guard. So they have to manufacture a lot of different looks, a lot of open looks for their offense. So I think that's something that the Sixers are going to be aware of with Brooklyn. And then the second thing is that we've seen that a lot with Philly this year. They love to trap the pick and roll ball handler high with Embiid. We've seen a ton of that. And with Claxton as the roll man, that's tough, man. Claxton's one of the better roll man finishers in the NBA. So I think they have to be smart about those two things and not allow open looks in the perimeter and at the rim, because the Nets can make you pay in those areas if you don't have the right personnel and the right defense on the court. So those are two things that I'm going to be looking for with Brooklyn.
All right. Let's wrap it up with series predictions, series MVP predictions. Sean, what are your vibes?
Yeah, I got Sixers in 5. As much as I do think the Nets are a better team than they've kind of been given credit, I've been surprised just the margin that the Sixers are favorites. I believe the line's up to like minus 900 of them winning it. I think the Nets are better than that indicates, but there's just a talent gap that is going to be shown face here. I mean, the Nets blew things up midseason. This is not the playoff contender that they intended on constructing or really plan to be at this point. So while I do think that there's areas that they could give the Sixers trouble and there will be stretches where they have a run and take over, I think Joel Embiid and the rest of the team are just too good. And the Sixers, they drop 1 but wrap it up in 5, a little gentleman sweep.
Well, Tiago.
That seems to be the popular pick. I'm going to go with 6. Sixers in 6. I think naturally people are going to pick 5, but you got to throw in the Doc Rivers. What the hell was that playoff game to the equation? I'm going to go with 6. I think that the Nets are a little bit better than, like you said, than people give them credit for. If it does go 6 or 7, I'll be concerned because talent-wise, this should be a sweep. Talent on talent, this should be a sweep. So. But we all seen the Sixers struggle with those level teams. But I think overall they'll be fine. And bigger fish to fry down the line with the Boston Celtics, hopefully.
You know there's going to be a game with Dedmon out there and no Harden and
bench lineup. Sixers up 1, and then 5 guys roll off the bench, and now it's a 10-point deficit, and you're like, what just happened?
All right, let's wrap it up, guys. Thank you everyone for watching. I'll throw it to you, Sean. Where can we find you, man? What do you got going on?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Sean_Bernard1. You can check out PickSwap Media for all my content for Sixers podcast and everything else. I've been doing some breakdowns of the playing games as well. Just dropped a podcast with shout out Zoe from the Right Ricky Sanchez newsletter. So just had him on the podcast and did our little preview. And yeah, you can catch me on Fox 102.5 The Gambler on Tuesdays, Thursdays between the 3 and 6 o'clock hour, as well as I'll be on Saturday with Mark Henry on the Tough Cover as well. So tune in for that.
Nice. Love it. Love it. Tiago, what do you got going on, man? Where can we find you?
That's a big get, Sean. You got Zoe on your podcast. How was that?
Good. He's the man. He's the man for sure. So that was good. It was good talking.
That's awesome. Good for you. Yeah, I'll be you can follow me at Tiago PHL. We'll be breaking down the Sixers as much as we can in this playoff series, and hopefully get a chance to talk about it after the game. So we'll see how everything shapes out, but needn't to worry, the Sixers will be fine this series.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe wherever you're watching. We're live on multiple platforms right now. Again, that is Sean_Bernard1 on Twitter and Tiago at Tiago PHL on Twitter. 2 of the best Sixers follows, period, in the game. And guys, we will see you Saturday during post-game, breaking it all down between the Sixers and Nets. Game 1. For Sean, for Tiago, for myself, stay awesome, everyone.